Our next guest, retired Army Lieutenant General Claude Mick Kicklighter, was selected to oversee the Vietnam 50th Anniversary Commemoration Program. The program has 5 objectives: to thank and honor veterans of the Vietnam War, including personnel who were held as prisoners of war or listed as missing in action for their service and sacrifice on behalf of the United States, and to thank and honor the families of these veterans. To highlight the service of the armed forces during the Vietnam War and the contributions of federal agencies and governmental and non-governmental organizations that served with or in support of the armed forces. To pay tribute to the contributions made on the home front by the people of the United States during the Vietnam War. To highlight the advances in technology, science, and medicine related to military research conducted during the Vietnam War. To recognize the contributions and sacrifices made by the allies of the United States during the Vietnam War. Lieutenant General Kicklighter served 35 years in the U.S. Army and retired in 1991. He had 2 tours of duty in Vietnam, from February 1966 through February of 1967 with the 1st Logistical Command, and from August 1970 to August 1971 as Assistant Chief of Staff G4 for the 101st Airborne Division. It's all right. You can. I think the general would like to hear that. He has commanded at all levels through division command. He served as the commander, U.S. Army Pacific, commander, 25th Infantry Division, and the commander of the U.S. Army Security Assistance Command. He also served as the director of the Army Staff. Lieutenant General Kicklighter's military awards include the Distinguished Service Medal, the Defense Superior Service Medal, the Legion of Merit, and the Bronze Star Medal. Since retiring from active military service, Lieutenant General Kicklighter has continued to serve the nation in a number of senior positions with the Department of Defense, State, and Veterans Affairs. He has received the Presidential Citizens Medal, the Eisenhower Liberation Medal, Decoration for Exceptional Civilian Service, and is a 2-time recipient of the Department of Defense Medal for Distinguished Public Service. Most recently, he served as the director of the Center for Infrastructure Protection and Homeland Security at George Mason University. Lieutenant General Kicklighter also served as the Executive Director of the United States of America 50th Anniversary of World War II Commemoration Committee. During the 1991-95 commemoration period, the committee planned and hosted events that honored the veterans, their families, and those who served on the home front. And the committee encouraged the study of the history of this period. Further, Lieutenant General Kicklighter provided oversight for the writing of the plan for the commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the Korean War. Comrades and sisters, please give a warm welcome to an outstanding leader and fellow life member of the Veterans of Foreign Wars, Lieutenant General Mick Kicklighter. General,
Thank you,
how are you, sir?
Commander. I'm great. Good to be with you.
Good to see you, sir.
Same here. Same here. Thank you, our National Commander. This is a great welcome, and it's like a homecoming to be back with so many friends and so many colleagues I've been able to work with throughout the years. What I've been asked to do this morning is to give you an overview of the program to help a grateful nation to finally properly honor and thank our Vietnam veterans and their families, and especially families who lost loved ones. The next slide, please. On this slide, you'll see the official Vietnam War commemorative flag, and I wish I had time to describe the symbolism of it to you, but it's taken right out of the law and it's taken out of your service. But I think the most important part of this flag is the bottom phrase, and this comes from your nation. and it says, "A grateful nation thanks and honors you, the Vietnam veterans, for your service, valor, and sacrifice." On this next slide, you'll see the agenda that I plan to briefly discuss with you this morning. First of all, I'd like to give you a little background how we got into this commemoration. And I think you'd be interested in knowing that we have a law that tells us how to do it. And our national commander outlined for you what the objectives of that law are for us to follow. And I'll describe the mission, and then very quickly I'll talk about this 13-year program of thanking and honoring our Vietnam veterans, and especially the families and the Gold Star families. Next slide, please. As I close, I'd like to share with you a little bit about the opening ceremony we conducted at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington on Memorial Day. But Congress passed a law in 2008, and they said that the Secretary of Defense, you'll have the mission to coordinate and to support this across our nation, and you'll involve all of the nation. 2011, the Secretary of Defense established the executive agent for this program, and he kept it inside of his office. The Director of Admin and Management, Michael Rhodes, is the executive director. And then we chose Memorial Day this past year to announce to the nation that this program is underway, and to also publish a presidential proclamation. We have copies of this proclamation for you at our booth if you'd like to have one. Next slide, please. The public law says that this program will be very veteran warrior-centric. It will stay focused all the way through the programs. We'll do a lot of things, but the main focus is to thank and honor our veterans and their families, and especially families who lost loved ones in that war, and families who still have family members who are unaccounted for. And we will also not be satisfied with this program until we feel that we've made every effort that every Vietnam veteran feels like that their nation has said, "Thank you for your service and your valor and your sacrifice 50 years ago." Next slide. On this slide, you've already heard from our national commander what the objectives are, and I want to assure you that our effort, and remember, this is not really a DOD program, this is a national effort. We're the recruiters, the organizers, the facilitators, but this is a national effort that will occur all across our nation. But we will stay focused on these objectives. And their number one objective, as you see in this chart, is to remember the veterans and their families, the prisoners of war, the unaccounted for, families who lost loved ones in that war. Next slide, please. The mission statement that we have derived from this, and we've talked about it, it really is a summary of the objectives. We are going to stay veteran focused. We're going to be focused on the warriors and what they accomplished on the battlefields that they were assigned to. And we'll remember the families. And again, we will not be satisfied. This will be very hometown centric. We want to go where the veterans live and thank them in hometown America. And that's why the veteran service organizations and the VFW will play such a key role in all this. Next slide, please. I thought it would be good for you to kind of understand the momentum and how we plan to conduct this commemoration. Phase one is the phase that we're in now, and this will run until 2014. And I'll describe some of the things that we're planning to do, just some highlights. But this is the recruiting, the building, the organizing, getting in place the things that we need to do to properly involve the whole nation. And then the execution phase, where we're really going to hometown America to thank our veterans and their families, will take place in 2015, 16, and 17. We hope to have events occurring continually throughout this period, all across this great land, and with our allies as well. And one of the objectives you heard our national commander say is that we will work with our allies of that war throughout the commemoration. And then the sustainment phase, after we build up to this momentum, runs from 2018 to 2025. And this is where we'll put in place all the things that we need to do to make sure that we properly reflect this generation's contributions to our nations. Its legacy has never been properly reflected. Next few slides, I'll quickly run through some of the things that will happen during the phases. And when I get through the phases, I'll give you a few highlights that occurred at our opening ceremony at Memorial Day. We've already done that. That was one of the objectives. We're now in the process of recruiting organizations like yours, your posts, your states, all across our nation to get organizations involved, the military involved, to help us support activities that will occur throughout the whole period. I'd like to make one point is that in any ceremonies that we have that are focused on the 50th anniversary of Vietnam, we will remember all of our veterans who served in all our wars. They will not be left out. And this generation knows what it feels like to be left out. They will not be left out. And we will remember in all our ceremonies the men and women who are on our battlefields today. We've already established an interagency working group, which is primarily all the services, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Departments of Veterans Affairs, Transportation, Homeland Security, which is the Coast Guard, and then very shortly we'll be expanding this to bring in veterans from each service from that war, and the chairman of this advisory committee will be a Vietnam veteran who will oversee and hold us accountable to make sure that we achieve the objectives which our Congress has tasked us to do and things that we will think about. And one of the key things that we'll strive to do is to work hand in glove with our veteran service organizations, and we've already begun to do that with the VFW, and I'll talk about that a little bit at the end. The next slide talks about some of the things that we've got underway now. We can raise money. We do have a treasury account that we can build up funds. So we're planning to mint coins. We're working with the Postal Service to put out postal stamps about this war. We're also building exhibits that we can send out to events in your locations, in your hometown. There will be a permanent Vietnam exhibit in the Pentagon. One of the corridors on the A-ring, which is 300 feet long, 20 feet wide, we'll be walking through kind of a time capsule of Vietnam. It will be very historically correct and very professionally done. And we hope that all of you someday will have a chance to walk through that corridor. It's in the design stage now. One thing that we want to make sure that we do not do, and that is not forget the Vietnamese who evacuated, escaped that country, and are now our U.S. citizens. And through all of our phases, we will work with and support our allies, and I'm sure they will support us. Let me just describe briefly how the defense is organized. We're working very closely with this interagency group. We've met about 10 times so far, and it includes memberships from all the services at the Lieutenant General, Assistant Secretary level, and then we'll have veterans involved at all ranks and anybody that the services feel is a good representative of those services, and they will keep us on track. The Pacific Command will be supporting events that take place in Hawaii, Alaska, and the Pacific region. Northern Command will be supporting events all over the continental U.S., and I'll describe a little bit more about what that support will be like. And then the Joint Forces Headquarters in the National Capital Region will support events that take place in the Washington, D.C. area. Next slide. As this organization has led the way in our country, education is going to be very important. And we are going to work hand in glove with what you have already done and what you are doing in the schools. But we want to make sure that working with you and others, we make available to teachers in grades 7 through 11 and colleges and ROTC departments all across this land very professional education materials. One thing that we will be doing also is doing DVD recordings of our veterans to capture their stories that will be around for a long time. Unfortunately, some of those great stories we've already missed, but we'll have available for teachers to invite in the classroom some very distinguished veterans with some very unique stories. Next slide. As we continue in start phase 2, again, the focus will be on our 5 objectives, keeping the veterans and their families up front. In this phase, we're asking every commemorative partner in every location that they're in to do at least 2 events each year in their hometowns to thank and honor veterans and their families. And we will assist in doing that in ways that we'll talk about later. We'll distribute educational materials through the commemorative partners and into educational institutions. And we'll continually working close with our allies. And we're going to assist Congress to conduct a joint meeting of Congress where the House and the Senate will come together and thank the veterans of the Vietnam War and their families in a joint meeting. Let me just describe a little bit about what the military organizations will be doing to support the effort that you'll have going on in Hometowns America. All the commands will support state, regional, and local events. Each military installation will be asked to conduct one open house each year during this phase 2 period where they thank and honor the Vietnam veterans, but all veterans. And they'll also be providing speakers, color guards, and bands. We'll have service bands that will be able to put on shows in places around the country, something like Bob Hope did in Vietnam. We're asking all the military units that are still on active duty forces, to have one homecoming where they invite the veterans and their families to come back to their division or their wing or their ship to commemorate this period. The Guard and Reserve units are all over the nation, and they'll be recruiting and supporting the communities they live in. And now we come to phase 3 and the final phase, and we've got a tremendous momentum going. And in these last 7 years, we want to do everything we can to keep that momentum going and making sure that if there's anything that we didn't do right during phase 1 and 2, we can make that correction in phase 2. And we'll continue to support our commemorative partners. And something that you do that I just applaud so much is that you've kept the spotlight on making sure that we have the fullest accounting for those that are still missing. And working with you and other organizations, we want to make sure that's one of our highlights. We'll also, in this final phase, we'll also ensure that the education materials that properly reflect the legacy of your service in Vietnam. You won all the major battles. You did all your nation asked. You served where duty called and duty assigned you, just as your forefathers had done in all our previous wars, and just as your children and your grandchildren are doing now. And we want to make sure that that legacy is properly recorded for all history to see in the future. So education and history and getting your legacy right is going to be a very important part of this. Let me now close with just a few remarks about the Memorial Day event and a few quotes from the speakers of that day. As you see on this chart, you see the opening ceremony. Let me recap some of the things that took place that day. Attending was President and Mrs. Obama, Vice President and Dr. Biden, Secretary of Defense, Secretary of Veterans Affairs, Secretary of Interior, the Deputy Secretary of State, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Senator Chuck Hagel, who was a young sergeant serving in the 9th Division in Vietnam, was one of the speakers, and all the senior leaders of our service was there. And as I mentioned earlier, Tom Selleck, a Vietnam-era veteran, was the Master of Ceremonies. We had 4,500 guests attend, veterans. The VIPs for that event were not the luminaries, but the VIPs at all of our events will be the Vietnam veterans and their families. The VSOs laid wreaths at the beginning of the ceremony, and at the closing before the final flyover, all the senior leaders that participated and were there that day escorted Gold Star family members from each of the service that laid a wreath in honor of the names that were on that wall. The host, as I said earlier, was the Secretary of Defense, and the co-host was the National Park Service and the Vietnam Veteran Memorial Fund. On this next slide, you'll see the copy of the proclamation. As I mentioned earlier, if you'd like a copy of this proclamation, we have it at our booth, and if you don't get by our booth, we'll be glad to send it to you. But this was the first time that anybody had seen or heard this proclamation, and we asked Congressional Medal of Honor recipient, First Lieutenant Brian Thacker from Vietnam, to read the proclamation, and that was kind of the beginning of the ceremony. And let me read for you a short quote from that. This will be a 13-year program to honor and give thanks to a generation of proud Americans who saw our country through one of the most challenging missions we've ever faced. While no words will ever fully be worthy of their service, nor any honor truly befitting their sacrifice, let us remember that it's never too late to pay tribute to the men and women who answered the call of duty with courage and valor. Let us renew our commitment to the fullest possible accounting for those who have not returned. And then on this next slide, you see President and Obama, as all the senior leaders did, escorting a Gold Star family. Here you see President and Mrs. Obama escorting Miss Rosemary Brown, the widow of Specialist for Leslie Sabo, during the wreath-laying last part of the ceremony. Specialist Sabo was only awarded that Congressional Honor 2 weeks early. He was killed in Vietnam, serving in the 101st Airborne Air Mobile Division, and his records had gotten lost, but that award was found, and he and his wife accepted along with his brother. Next slide. Let me just share a few excerpts from this. President was the keynote speaker. He was our commander. He is our commander-in-chief. And this is a couple of sentences from his remarks. By the way, if you want to see this ceremony, it is on our website, and you can watch it whenever you like. 4,500 people did attend the ceremony. It was carried live on 3 networks across the nation, and about 1,200 people watched it live on our website. And here's some few excerpts from the President's remarks. And one of the most painful chapters in our history was Vietnam, most particularly how we treated our troops who served there. You were blamed for a war you didn't start, when you should have been commended for serving your country with valor. You were sometimes blamed for the misdeeds of a few, when the honorable service of the many should have been praised. You came home and sometimes were denigrated when you should have been celebrated. It was a national shame, a disgrace that should have never happened. And that's why today we resolve that it will never happen again. On this next slide, you see Secretary Panetta, who was the host, as I mentioned, escorting Miss Sarah Frances Shea. She's the 93-year-old mother of Major John Shea, U.S. Air Force, who is still missing in action from Vietnam. This mother has waited 42 years for her son to come home. And let me quote a few lines from Secretary Panetta's remarks that day. Many more came home from the war to this country that failed to fully acknowledge their service and their sacrifice, and failed to give them the honor they so justly deserved. That experience, that failure to thank those who were willing to put their lives on the line for their country, was burned into the soul of my generation. For too many years, veterans, the recognition of their bravery came too late. The Vietnam generation, my generation, is graying now. But this commemoration effort gives this country an opportunity today and in the years ahead to try and right the wrong of the past, to remember those who have served in this war and what they did for us and the service and the sacrifice they made on our behalf. On this next slide, you see a few days later, the commemoration at the wall, Secretary Panetta arriving in Vietnam. And we believe the results of the Memorial Day event helped prepare him for that trip. And as a result of that trip and the improvement of bilateral relations with Vietnam, Vietnam opened up 3 previously restricted areas so that we can do joint POW-MIA operations. And maybe a few more of our unaccounted for will now come home. This next slide is our chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who was one of the briefers. And on this slide, you see General Marty Dempsey escorting Mr. Dave Clinker, who is the brother of Captain Mary Clinker, an Air Force nurse who gave her life in Vietnam. She was one of 8 women who died in that war. And she was killed on the aircraft that crashed during baby lift. And let me just quote a little bit, and I'll close. Let me quote a little bit from his remarks, and I'll paraphrase a little bit. General Dempsey said when he was a 16-year-old dishwasher in a restaurant in upstate New York, a young Army captain named John Graham came home from the Vietnam War. Captain Graham became one of his heroes and inspired him to choose the profession of arms. And so he went to West Point. And in his plebe year, his first year, Captain Graham was killed on his second tour in Vietnam. And he said at the end of his remarks, and whether they served in Vietnam or Iraq or Afghanistan, or whether they returned home or are still awaiting their homecoming, there's no difference in their courage and their sense of duty. All of our servicemen, men and women, in all our wars are alike. Shortly after I was selected to this position, I was visited by the senior leadership, our commander-in-chief, our senior vice commander-in-chief, our junior vice commander-in-chief, our adjutant. Bob Wallace has visited with us several times. And the message to me from the Vietnam Veterans of America and the VFW, that message from the VFW was that no organization will ever do more to support this commemoration than will the VFW. This program needs the VFW senior leadership. It needs our Ladies Auxiliary, but especially it needs our post in hometown America to make sure that you recruit, that you lead, that you organize, and you help us support events where the veterans live. We're counting on you to do that. Our Vietnam veterans in this great nation need that support. And I know that you'll do it. You've done it in all of our commemorations. And as I close this morning, let me quote just one line from a poem from a Vietnam veteran. It matters not what politicians argue. It matters not what history would reveal. We had no expectation but to serve where duty called us, and we asked no reward except a nation's thanks. God bless all of our Vietnam veterans. God bless their families. God bless all of our veterans, and especially bless our troops on the battlefield. God bless America. We need you, and we'll do it together.
Thank you very much, General. Appreciate it. Good having you here. We appreciate you coming.